Hi everybody, I'm Sue Walker. I'm sitting next to my friend Kevin Estrella, and we are continuing our official first contact topics, and we brainstormed a little bit before we started tonight as to topics that we haven't necessarily shared with the public before, the things that the Ponte or other Star Nations have shared with us. And so tonight we're going to go over a few more unusual topics and see where the conversation naturally goes. So, just in case nobody's ever met you, can you introduce and tell people a little bit about yourself?
Sure. My name's Kevin Estrella. I'm known as the guitarist of the band Pyramids on Mars. I'm also the show host of Pyramids on Mars UFO Radio on the ArtistFirstNetwork.com. And I've been an experiencer since at least 2014. But I've had contact with the Ponte since 2016, which has been ongoing and pretty much weekly.
So, and still ongoing.
And still ongoing. Yes, they are friends. They are family to me. They are wonderful people, and they've changed our lives completely.
Totally. I'm Sue Walker, and I'm the individual that the Ponte contacted in 2013 in September. Come this September, the fall equinox time frame, it will be 10 years exactly as to the very first time that Commander Teal'c spoke to Otter and I. And we've been telepathically translating for the Ponte online in social media accounts since June of 2015. And they have provided us with so much information. A lot of that is just as not ever gotten out to the public, because it's not like we're trying to hide it. We aren't. There's so much. There are so many things that we talk about. It's trying to remember all the different conversations you've had with all of your friends for a whole day and write down all the details of all of those. Some of it you just experience and hold in your head. Some of it they ask us to share with the public, and other things they don't. But they don't say that we shouldn't. When we hit an unusual topic, normally I ask them, is it okay to talk about XYZ? Can we do that? Is it time? And if I get a positive response, then we go ahead and share. And if I get no response or a negative response, then I wait until I get a positive response. So if I ask them about sharing topic XYZ and I don't hear back, I won't say anything about it publicly until I do hear back, because I don't want to come across as trying to jump the gun. I know that the Ponte are answering to the Federation Communications Division folks only because they're an information station. They are here to provide, their first duty is here to provide information to interstellar visitors visiting Earth. And they're one of 4 land-based stations that do that here, that are managed by the Ponte. There's also 4 aquatic stations. But if you want to know where those land-based and aquatic stations are, you can search the archives of the Twitter account, and they'll give you the GPS coordinates and the locations and the names of those other Ponte-managed information station facilities. When we started talking to the Ponte, I'm not going to talk in the plural, I'm going to talk about just me. I experienced a lot of overwhelm the first 6 months. From the very beginning of Teal'c talking to me and into that first 2013-2014 time frame, Oh my God, there was so much information. I did end up keeping a journal, and that helped to write it down, but I dealt with a lot of insomnia. And it wasn't because I was afraid. That wasn't the reason for the insomnia. My insomnia and overwhelm were more with, if they come and give me more information and want to talk to me, I don't want to miss them. And so I tended to, they're nocturnal. I was not. And I tended to want to stay up later or get up earlier to talk to them. And then without adequate sleep, a lot of things go south real fast. Have you ever experienced the overwhelm and the insomnia due to anything regarding the Ponte? Has that happened to you?
I think the overwhelm came from the downloads. Sometimes that was a physical overwhelm.
Explain to our friends out here in the universe what you mean when you say download.
So a download is essentially where they would come and give us information. They basically, I don't know how they do it telepathically, but information would be downloaded into your consciousness, while you're asleep. And they could be taking you back on a ship, or they could just be by your bed. I have no idea. But I do know the symptoms that were happening, because they were quite they were regular, and they were always the same. And so when these first started happening, Sue was telling me about, you could be getting downloads, and there's certain symptoms to be aware of. And so for me, I started to notice the first times was where I wake up in the morning and I'd be a little bit tired, but then by about 1 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm so exhausted that my brain feels literally like soggy cotton, and I cannot stay awake. I will fall asleep at my desk uncontrollably. And then I realize, okay, I think something happened last night. And then when I get home, I immediately lie down and I go into a deep sleep, like a reboot nap. That's essentially what it's called.
A reboot nap. I like that term.
Yeah.
That's a good term.
So most of the downloads I would be able to recover within 1 day. Some of them were more intense than that. The most intense I experienced was the telepathy. It was the tonal language of the whales download.
Yes, that one's a hard one for you. That was a long stretch too. Yeah,
that was a massive download, and it took me 3 days to recover from that download. It was crazy. I didn't know what the heck happened. And then when I contacted Sue, and she, and then Thera came on and said, well, you wanted to learn the tonal language, we gave you the beginner's course. And then somehow I was getting this image that was being shown to me of Radar jumping on, like having a whale brain sitting on top of my head, and he's trying to stuff it into my head. And that's what it felt like.
Oh, I don't know who's got the stranger images like that just make me bust a gut. Radar or Grayson. Those two, I swear. Oh my goodness. We know the names of quite a few of the Ponte, and if you'd like to see what the individuals that we're talking about look like, go to officialfirstcontact.com, and you're looking for the images of the crew. You can also go to my YouTube channel, which is ampersand or at Sandia Wisdom, just like the Twitter account name, and look for the video that is the current roster of the Ponte. I think I did one in 2022. That was the latest roster that I did. And it gave their name, their title, and I think the second image was something personal about them. So if you want to get to know a little bit about who's who and what they like or what they do in their off hours, or an extra piece of information.
Well, there was an audio that actually you said their name, so people would know how to pronounce their name.
Yes, and so when we talk about Tani, You're talking about somebody that we also, tongue-in-cheek, call Teeny. If you're talking about Rahaz, we also have the nickname Radar. And so,
Or Brinkman.
yep. If you're talking about Grayson, he also has a nickname of Grayspear because he likes William Shakespeare. And so some of these nicknames they gave each other. And some of them we teasingly gave them. And that's been all kinds of fun. But it's worthwhile. They all have different personality types. They all have different things that they do when they're off duty. And that kind of brings me to some of the things that we were going to talk about. And the first one was, of all the things about the Ponte that you can think of when you first got introduced, what made the most sense to you? What made you go, well, duh, that makes sense? But also, the other flip side of that is, what surprised the hell out of you? What made you go, say what? What? And so, of all the things about the Ponte, what made the most sense to you?
I think the biggest thing that made sense was when they posted on Twitter talking about the protocols that Star Nations must follow in order to make contact with Kiwa, Earth humans, which there are 3 rules. It's A, cause no fear, B, do no harm, C, leave no trace. And so these 3 rules started to make a lot of sense in regards to why these rules have to be followed in order for it to benefit both of us, to benefit us and to benefit them. So in order to have contact with Star Nations, you have to get over your fears, because you're going to experience things that break the laws of physics, that are going to make you go, holy cow. Wow, I had no idea. Because once you start seeing what it is that they are capable of, or their telepathic abilities, their consciousness abilities, there's so much that we do not understand about nature of the universe and our relationship to the whole collective and consciousness itself. So they live in a much bigger world than we are, and we have to kind of try and meet them halfway. So the first thing we need to do is get over our fears.
Yes.
So that they can then interact with us at our level of comfort. Whether it be, you study the primer for 100 days, and then you go outside and you're calling in a ship, and then the ship, and you say blink, blink, and the thing blinks back at you, and that's your level of comfort. That's great. Others, they've had the Ponte come in and drop in and visit with them, and leave handprints or move something or tap the back of your shoulder like they do with me, or kick the back of the couch. It really depends on your level of comfort. So that's
I will agree with that. The protocols that they had to operate by, any group that goes to another world to experience another sentient population is going to have their own rules that they have to operate under. Our own militaries have their rules that when they go into another country, they have to operate under. And so it made sense to me that when the Ponte came to visit us, they had rules that they had to follow, and it also explained their actions. So people talk about abductions and why do they do that? And when we asked the Ponte that question for the very first time, they called them wellness visits or health checkups. And so they oftentimes will follow individuals for years, from very small children through teenage years, through young adulthood, even into old age. And I can tell you, I've been interacting with Star Nations since I was 3.5, which is 60 years ago. And so it's, anytime you would do a long-term study of an animal here, let's say if you did a long-term study of elephants because of their lifespan, part of that interaction with studying them would involve their health. And that's no different with star nations and us. But one of the things that made sense to me with the protocols is, even with all of the visits and interactions I had with them well before I ever knew that they were the Ponti, when it was the individuals with the gray skin and the large dark eyes that were about yay tall, and I didn't know their names. I couldn't get them to answer back to me back 20 years ago. And it bothered me that I begged and pleaded for them to please interact with me. Please talk to me. I couldn't help them if we couldn't communicate. And I think that request eventually led to the interaction of Tilcom introducing himself to me 10 years ago. But the things that they do to bend over backwards to not cause you fear, that's the thing that stood out to me about the visits that I had early on, is they never hurt me, and they seemed to really work hard to make sure that I wasn't afraid. And people talk about the screen memories that they have. And you've had screen memories, I've had screen memories. What do we mean by screen memories? When you're dealing with a telepathic nation, they have the ability to put an image in your head of what they want you to see. It's part of their communication style. It's how they talk to each other, is sending information back and forth in images and audio and emotions and energy and everything else. But when they want to make sure that we don't freak out when we're with them, sometimes they will insert an image that overlays on top of them so that we don't freak out when we see somebody with large dark eyes and gray skin that's about 3.5 feet tall.
They may appear as a 3 foot, 4 foot bunny.
Yes.
The kids, you know.
We've had people describe 3 foot tall bunnies, owls, squirrels, deer that are acting unusually, but anything that is about children, I've seen or heard about interaction, kids talking to other quote kids, okay? But any image in their research of you that they feel that you won't freak out about. Sometimes the screen memory will be somebody that you knew from high school but haven't seen in 20 years.
Yes.
Okay. For me, I remember one night I was having a dream, quote unquote, and in the dream it suddenly shifted. And I was fishing in the dream and suddenly pulled up a 3.5 foot tall shark that stood on its hind flippers, gray, and spoke to me. And I went, "You're not a shark." I knew better by that point in time.
That was like an lucid dream?
Yes.
Yeah.
And then
I got a story to tell
yeah,
you too.
and you have a lucid dream story like
I'll
that
tell you,
too.
but I'll tell you that in a second.
So I have spoken with a number of individuals that are women who have had pregnancies that changed, either were lost or altered by what they think are the Ponti. I will tell you right now, as far as I know, the Ponti do not do that specifically. Some of the other star nations I can't speak for because I don't talk to those nations. But that's the one thing that made sense to me also, is they said, please don't lump all star nations and visitors to Earth together as if they're all from the same place, all with the same agenda, here for all the same reason, that they're all emotionless or they will be like automatons, programmed. That's not true at all. They've asked us specifically to treat each individual star nation like its own entity because, and in their words, it was very plain. They said, you would not want somebody from, let's say, here in New Mexico, confused with somebody from another continent, and or somebody who might be violent. You don't want to be assigned the attributes of another person that is not you. And so
treat them as, treat as individuals. You would not want Star Nations to judge all of humanity based on one group in society.
right, don't think that the actions of one individual reflect the actions of an entire planet either. Because you know and I know, you could have a person that is independent or rogue or different, and their ideas may not even be shared by the rest of their crew, much less the rest of their planet. So don't jump to conclusions. Don't assume. That's the one thing that I see a lot of people online doing, is assuming things without adequately checking or doing research. So what, of all the things about the Ponte, what surprised you the most? What floored you and made you go, say what?
There's been a lot of things, but the telepathic screening was quite amazing. When we talked about them being able to change in their appearances, where I had that happen with PETA visiting me one time, and he was standing right in front of me, and he changed his appearance like if he was a green screen, and he turned himself into a stormtrooper, but it was a Halloween costume stormtrooper that I recognized later on, a few weeks later, that it was one of the Halloween costumes that my kids had worn. So somehow PETA had gone into my memory. He wanted to calm me down, and he found a pleasant memory of my kids wearing this Halloween costume. And then then after that, he flipped his face to look like an old friend from high school who I haven't seen. But talk about
trying everything.
Yeah, but the other cool things, like talk about some of the amazing things that they've been able to do, and we talk about lucid dreams, where there was and we're talking about screenings. There was one time where I was lucid dreaming for the entire night.
I've had those.
And
that's crazy. It feels so different.
Yeah, you're totally in control. Every dream, you are totally in control. It's like living in a video game. It's amazing. But when I contacted you the next morning, you said that the Ponte said that they figured that I could handle it at this point. But what I remember was I was in this abandoned house, and in one of the front rooms, that I could hear a whole bunch of people in the room. And I walked into the side room before it, and I could see the window was open. And I looked in that room, and I could see about a dozen children and then about a dozen adults. And they were cutting homemade pizzas. Now, keep in mind, this is a lucid dream. I'm totally know what I'm doing here. But it was when I saw the pizza, it was like it had blobs of cheddar cheese and mozzarella and vegetables. When I saw the vegetables, it gave it away. I knew what was going on here. And so I come into the room, and it was a big pizza party that they were throwing for me. And so then they hand me this piece of pizza. And I said, guys, I know who you are. And the side thought was, you're all Star Nations. And then they all completely flipped out, and we're all talking, going, oh, no, 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 no. They're all talking at the same time and freaking out. So I kind of blew their cover. But afterwards, when I talked to you the next morning, you said that it wasn't just the Ponte's idea. There were other Star Nations there as well. So that made sense when I saw the 10-year-old children, and then I saw the adults. So there was like several different types of Star Nations who were throwing this pizza party for me, essentially.
A lot of people get freaked out when they learn that Star Nations know things about our culture that you don't expect. So let me give you, for instance, when I found out that Radar studied science fiction movies, television shows, documentaries, media, anything that was extraterrestrial or UFO related, and knew things like Stargate SG-1, Star Wars, Star Trek better than I did, which takes a lot because I grew up with all that stuff. I was the one odd girl that loved science fiction. When I found out that they knew that stuff, I went, no way. Why? And Joachim explained that they keep track of the reaction Earth humans have to extraterrestrial things presented in media, like movies and TV, to see how ready are they for official first contact. They used it as a monitoring device and then realized that many Earth humans are swayed by the things that they see in movies and television and think that even if it's fiction on TV, that it's real. That's not always true, but not always false. There are things that are true
It's not always
about.
it's not always a bad thing either. There's so
So-
much truth hidden right in front of your face in all these TV series that you think it's like in the back of your mind, you're thinking, I think that's actually possibly real.
The one thing that surprised me was when Joachim described the Ponti as cultural explorers. They would go from planet to planet and sentient people to sentient people in their explorations, looking for what that group, those peoples, had as parts of their culture that were special. So what do I mean by that? Cultural things are anything that you love to do when you get off of work. When you have free time, what do you gravitate toward? What do you love? Do you love music? Do you love books? Do you love sports? Do you love exercise? What is it that foods, what is it that you have that are your special memories and your special loves? And those things involve special holidays, traditions that revolve around birth of children, deaths, ceremonies like bonding ceremonies like marriage, okay? Those are collection points that go across cultures and across species that individual groups of peoples have their own rituals about. So if I think of an ant colony and an ant dies, they don't just abandon it, they have specific rituals around that dead clan member.
Same with ravens.
Right, same with ravens, same with Sasquatch, same with us. And so it's one of those cultural things that goes across species, and those are the things that they study. Joachim used the phrase that they considered themselves gardeners of intellect. And I said, okay, tell me more about what you mean by that. And he said, we will telepathically nudge or suggest things to individuals to help them be happier, be healthier, achieve their greatest potential, meet individuals, other individuals that further their growth. And I said, so you nudge people together? And they said, yeah, sometimes. Whether that's friends, teachers, couples. I can't tell you, I've lost track of how many people that were associated with the Twitter account specifically, but social media, who started out single, met other individuals through the Twitter account or Facebook or whatever it was, and became a couple. And so significant other relationships is a common thing. That nudging that they do, they call it being suggested. You have been suggested. It's not that they're ordering you to do something, it's just they're elbowing you or nudging you in a general direction to see if you're ready to pursue that person, place, thing, idea, whatever it is. So being suggested, I found, is a good thing, because it has caused me to meet people or get corroboration about something that they've said from a source that I had no idea about. Let me give you, for instance, in 2012, before I ever moved down here to New Mexico, we, and that would be Otter and myself, were in Iowa at a Sundance. And who was invited to that Sundance that we met for the first time? A Zuni elder by the name of Clifford Mahooty. We met Clifford in 2013 in Iowa. And then I came down here and met the Ponte after that. But it was Clifford who corroborated information about things that the Ponte told us about. Case in point, when we started sharing the fact that there were extraterrestrials underneath the Sandia Mountain, we had no idea that the Pueblo peoples and the Native Americans of New Mexico, Arizona, had known that fact for centuries. Centuries. And I just went, wait, what? And so Clifford corroborated the fact that they were even there and just shrugged it off as everyday normal. It was just part of their history. And I went, huh. But that was not the only kind of corroboration. When Teal'c first started teaching us archaeoplanetography, Clifford's jaw also dropped, but he didn't tell us that for 6 months. I showed him the images that Teal'c was teaching us about that were embedded in the landscape, and we call the archaeoplanetography images, we also call them APG. It's just our shorthand. When he first saw the images that I was outlining, Clifford finally, about 6 months later, admitted to me that as a boy, he was trained in ancient Zuni prayers, some of which referred to the images embedded in the landscape. They already knew about them. The phrase, the face on the mountain, that's just not the whole slope of the mountain. That is specific images that refer to a person's face, an animal's face on the mountain. Those are APG images that you can see from the ground. And he knew about those, but he was also aware that there were some that you could see from orbit that he couldn't see. And that's the stuff that Teal'c had started teaching us in late November, early December of 14, again, well before the social media accounts were ever open. So again, corroboration of things that we had to take on blind faith that turned out to be not only true, but normal and expected and understood by others. What else surprised me? The friendship between the Ponte and the Sasquatch.
Yeah.
What? I thought, that's a big stretch. What do extraterrestrial nations have to do with Sasquatch? And I was not well read in either genre, either UFO books or extraterrestrial books or Sasquatch books, they were not on my shelf of paranormal reading. I was a clean slate when I first came into this. And when Tilcomb first described the friendship that the whole Ponte Nation has with the entire Sasquatch Nation, I just had to drop my jaw and be quiet and listen for a while, because I wasn't sure that I could believe what I was hearing. And sure enough, corroboration again. I had a very good conversation with Mark Abel of Colorado Bigfoot, and he started saying there are others that live alongside the Sasquatch or are associated with the Sasquatch. And he kept referring to the others, but he wasn't sure that the general public was ready to hear what the others were. And so when I told him that the Ponte had kicked us into understanding the Sasquatch because the two nations were pals and that they hung around together, he finally let down his guard and admitted to me that he has seen extraterrestrials on many occasions and videotaped a number of them in the high above 9,000 feet in the mountains of Colorado as he goes up doing his squatching to film Bigfoot.
Yeah.
And so the others also involve other beings that are not extraterrestrials, that are indigenous here to Earth, but who also might be multidimensional. And that leads us to a whole other topic. Tell me where you're at and what you understand about multidimensional or dimensional beings. Let's start with what you know, and then we'll share with what the Ponte have said to us.
Sure. So my first experiences with multidimensional beings happened during a meditation at Lake Ontario in Hamilton, where I brought my guitar and was doing a meditation, and I invited any Star Nation or dimensional beings to come into my vicinity if they wanted to listen to me play. And I opened my eyes, and right in front of me was, right across Lake Ontario, was this massive cloud of a dragon, perfectly formed dragon with scales along its neck, breathing fire, its eyes, and the whole body went out into two long lizard-like wings with hands in all the right places and legs that stretched about 2 miles in the sky. It was the only cloud.
So really detailed.
Extremely detailed.
Huh.
It was, I got photographs of it, and everybody who's seen the photographs cannot deny what they are seeing. So that was an experience with dimensionals. I've also experienced...
Oh. When you say experience with dimensionals, what do you mean that was an experience with dimensionals?
I think that honestly that was a dimensional being who was showing itself when I put out that invitation.
So you're saying that the whole cloud was one-dimensional being?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
I think so.
Okay. Did it try and communicate with you at all?
No.
Okay.
No, but it stayed in the sky for like 20, 30 minutes. It didn't change. It stayed as it was.
How did that correspond with what you were experiencing at the time? Why do you think there was a dragon in the sky?
Well, that goes into a lot of stuff with me personally that I can't really get into.
Okay, all right. So it was specific to you.
Very specific to me.
And it made, with your own personal history, a lot of sense.
Made a lot of sense.
Okay,
That I learned
that's what I needed
a
to
lot
know.
more that I learned over the years about my connection with dragons. So we'll just leave it at that. Yeah, but that wasn't the only experience with dimensionals that I've had. I think also at the same time when I was doing that, I looked up and I could see what looked like sparkles, like you know, like when you have the sparklers, when you light the
Yes,
sparklers
right.
and you shake them in the sky. That's what I was seeing dancing in the sky, were all these sparklers. Everywhere I was looking were these dancing, sparkly lights. And I was thinking, is it an optical illusion? Is it pressure in my optics that's causing this? But no, I've experienced it many times. Every time that I've landed at Albuquerque, New Mexico airport, or when I'm waiting to go back home, I look out and I'll see them when I'm looking at the mountain.
Okay.
And I also saw them when I was in Sedona, Arizona, when the sun was setting, and it was surrounded by the same little, sparkly lights that were dancing in the sky. I honestly believe that those are dimensional beings.
I'm not going to disagree with that, and I have a story that corroborates that. So, Otter and I went to go visit a friend of ours in Sedona by the name of Darrell Stokes. And you know Darrell.
Oh, yeah.
Darrell is a friend of ours who is one of the most interesting paranormal photographers that we know. And he took us to a local spring in Sedona that you had to kind of hike a half a mile to get to. All right. Mm-hmm. So this little spring was lovely, and by the time we got there, it was just before sunset. And he said that the whole area was filled with special beings of some kind, and not all of them could you see. When we got there, he gave us a specific instruction that I thought was very curious. He said, those sparkles of light that you sometimes see, whether it's white or a pop of blue or pink or whatever it is, if you see one of those, point it out immediately. Just don't even stop and break a conversation. Just point and say, there. And we will take our cameras and immediately take pictures of that location. And so I thought, okay.
I have first-hand experience with Darrell Stokes, too, doing this.
Yes. So I'm standing next to his daughter who has a camera in hand. And I look up into the crotch of a tree that's maybe 20 feet high, but had obviously been burned at some point in time. It had a V crotch in it about 20 feet up that was blackened, like it had been struck by lightning. And in the middle of the V crotch, suddenly there was this little flash pinpoint of light. No biggie, but I followed instructions and I turned to Darrell's daughter and I said, right there. And so she immediately, in a microsecond, was taking picture after picture after picture. What I saw as a pinpoint of light came out on the camera as a basketball-sized orb. And I went, how does that work? That's all I saw was a pinpoint of light. And then the Ponti reminded me that our eyesight spectrum is pretty small and limited. We can't see nearly the full spectrum of ultraviolet to infrared that many other star nations can. And he said, by the way, that round spherical shape is oftentimes the easiest shape for a multidimensional being who wants to go from point A to point B and observe things to take. It's like remote viewing in a sphere. And I went, really? Well, then we started getting more corroboration from other people who had more experience with orbs than I had about that very idea. And even Darrell went home and whipped through his photos and pointed out to me orbs that he had taken photos of that had full faces or multiple faces, as if I was looking into the orb and seeing somebody's control room or control console on a ship. And I went, how does this work? And I don't have the answer for all that. I don't. All I know is what I am learning about other people are also describing. When we listened to the Sasquatch researcher Mike Patterson, who interacts with a Sasquatch whose name is Neph or Nephitia. Mike was very hesitant to describe his friend Nephitia the Sasquatch's ability to manifest things out of thin air. And what he meant by that, and let me give you an example, he was sitting inside the landowner's cottage, and the two of them were sitting having a beer and joking about all the different marbles that they were finding that Neff was leaving for them. And Mike jokingly said, geez, I don't know how good their aim is, because, you know, they chuck marbles, they chuck rocks, they chuck sticks at people, and they have very good aim. And he was joking with the landowner about Nephitia's aim, and held up the beer bottle and said, I wonder if he could, you know, hit this opening. And a moment later, a marble manifested out of thin air straight over the beer bottle and clinked straight down into the bottom of it. He will tell you that story. You can go on the Sasquatch Ontario
That's just coincidence.
YouTube channel and listen to Mike tell that story in his own words. But then it just is amazing. He also tells the story, and I think you related to me and reminded me of it, where he watched Nephitia take a marble and very slowly push it from their dimensional space into ours. We understand that there is a natural ability of the Sasquatch to go from our dimension into theirs and to take other objects and have them go back and forth. When I think about that, we have some photos of Sasquatch or some videos where they take 1, 2, 3 steps, and when they start, they're solid, and by the time they've taken the 3rd step, they're completely see-through, and then they vanish. And that's been witnessed and described and photographed by more than one individual now. We do understand now that a Sasquatch, even though they might live locally on the mountain or in the Valles Caldera or in a cave up by the border
or
of
Ancaster, Ontario.
Yep. We understand that, but they can come visit you at your home in a heartbeat and be inside your house.
Experienced it.
Me too. The first time it happened here, the weight, the telepathic weight of a Sasquatch when they communicate is massive. And they have that massive sense about them when they talk to you, to the point where when I had one standing right next to me and I suddenly realized it was there, I cringed and ducked. I mean, it was that instinctive. It was like, whoa, whoa, hi. And I physically felt like it was more difficult to move just because they were right there. And I don't think that they were trying to control me. I think it was just the massive weight, if I can use that term, of their presence and their communication style. That takes us into, well, let's finish the dimensional topic too. So we're talking about multi-dimensional nations that can step across that barrier of our dimension into theirs. Or we're talking about dimensional people who don't necessarily ever have to take a body like ours, that they stay in an energetic state in our terms and operate and do whatever they're going to do, like form a cloud. And then that segues into, how does that differ from an elemental person? an earth person, an air person, a fire person, a water person, as far as unseen world folks that are associated with those elements of nature.
Sure, yeah. I think thinking about it, with physical, those who can be physical and then dimensional, I've experienced it with Ponte visits in my house, where on a regular basis they will usually drop in on a Friday night, Saturday night, where I'll be playing my PS4 and playing some games, and they'll be behind the couch and watching me play. And they will sometimes bump the back of the couch. It's been going on for years now, and it's increased. It's regular now. It's like weekly now, but it makes me think, because I've talked with other experiencers who have worked with the Ponte, and I was asking about, okay, did they just fly a ship over here and they landed and they're behind me? And I've been told no, they don't necessarily need to do that. They can show up dimensionally. And so it's still an enigma for us trying to figure this out. How do they get there? How can they be behind me all of a sudden? Just show up and kick the back of the couch or whatever, or tap me on the shoulder, or whatever. It's amazing that they can do that. But then you have other dimensional beings who you don't see them until they're actually photographed. And a great one to talk about is fairies. They're real. They're very real. Trust me. Talking about Darrell Stokes. He and I had gone out. It was at the Sasquatch Conference, Chuela, in 2019, and he took me out to go photographing, and we took over 200 photographs, and every single one of them were orbs, whether it be one orb or 10,000 orbs. They were just everywhere. But there's one particular photo that I hadn't paid attention close enough to. And then somebody pointed it out about a year and a half ago. And they pointed out in this photograph, it looks like a butterfly made of light. But it was flying kind of just past the same level where my head was. It was as big as my head. And somebody said, that is a fairy. Now, Darrell has also taken photographs of other fairies, and we've seen them. And fairies kind of come in, there's two kinds. Some have butterfly wings, some have dragonfly wings. And we've seen photographs of both. Some with with dragonfly wings and some with butterfly wings. And Darrell has taken photographs of these elemental beings. So, these are things you need to pay attention to that are actually very real.
You talked about the Ponte watching you play your video stuff, and in fact, they asked me about that specifically, and let me show you something that I drew after our conversation with them. This is me holding a gaming controller.
Xbox controller, yes.
And she seriously said, why do you spend so much time with these small devices? Why do you do that gaming that for hours and hours and hours? What is the fascination instead of going to do things in real life? Mm-hmm. It was a fair question.
Yeah.
So let's pause for just a second. Our unit just kicked on and is going to be noisy, I think.
All right, sure.
I'm not sure, and we don't have Dale here to listen to it to see, is there an on-off switch? There you go. Thank you.
Did it just shut off?
It takes a while to shut off.
Okay.
There you go. You did it. It's a warm day today, and I have a small air conditioning unit here in the studio that keeps things adequate when I have to close the door to the rest of the house and not get that conditioned air from our swamp cooler. But it can get noisy when we're in conversation, and I didn't expect it to kick up. That's right. So anyway, I wanted to show you the consternation that they had with our controllers, but also the fascination. And all of them want to pick it up, play with buttons. Ponte are button pushers. Any button, any switch, they want to see what it does and how it works. And so we have had to teach trainees that you got to be careful or cautious and put things back the way you found them. And if you don't know how to do that, don't push the buttons in the first place. So, case in point, we've had to talk to them about if a door is locked when you come in, make sure it's locked when you leave, especially if it's a door to the outside, because that's a safety concern for the rest of the house. Let me switch back to regular programming. Anyway, we've had to talk to them about button pushing. It's not uncommon for them to turn our TV on and off. It's not uncommon for them to push buttons and change the channel. That's an easy do. We did have to talk to them about also things like baby gates and pets, that if the pet was outside when you arrive, make sure it's outside when you leave, or inside, don't let it out without bringing it back in. So they realize that when pets are in a house, they have to make sure that they keep them under control. And frequently, the easiest way for them to do that is to put them to sleep. Because otherwise, if they pop into a house and there's a dog that's trained in barking when strangers are present, might wake up the whole household, and then that would ruin their mission and destroy what they wanted to do, which was to not cause any fear. So pets and kids, they are very cautious about not creating fear with those folks. Now, every once in a while, they get taken by surprise. And I've shocked them at least twice, to the point where, well, the first time I did it was the very first time I got visited by one of the Jalohu. It's a star nation that looks like the Ponte, only stretched tall to about 8 feet. And when the first individual from the Jalohu nation was in my bedroom and I woke up and saw him physically with my own eyes, I froze. And when he reached out to try and touch my foot under the covers of the bed, I sat up real fast and I yelled at him. I yelled real hard, "What are you doing here?" And he did not expect me to yell at him or be awake. He had kind of gotten lax and not double checked that I was still asleep, even though I was motionless. And when I yelled at him, he got the most startled look on his face. It was precious. And he turned and he bolted through the wall. Which takes us into another topic of portals. Okay. Have you seen any star nations come and go either in a ship or as a person on 2 feet or floating? Have you ever seen a portal form or a Star Nation person use a portal? Has that happened to you?
Yeah, I'm trying to think here. I haven't seen a Star Nation use a portal. I have seen, it was the first UFO that I saw that was, they confirmed later on, was Ponte, that when it was moving away, kind of had the appearance of this almost like a portal thing that was forming in front of it, because the ship, when I saw it on its side, it was glowing orange and red, but then when it turned south towards Binbrook, it had no lights whatsoever. It was completely black, and it was kind of shaped like a football, but it had this kind of vortex that was forming in the front of it. This swirling, looked like a bolt, like a umbrella energy.
So you did see a portal forming?
I guess in front of it. It looked
Yeah.
like that, something like that.
Was it two-dimensional or three-dimensional?
Three-dimensional.
Okay. All right. Was it a particular shape?
Yeah, it was like an umbrella.
An umbrella.
Yeah.
When you say an umbrella, like a hanging up and umbrella and spokes and a handle and
Kind of like spokes, like almost like a spinning galaxy.
huh.
That's what it looked like, a spinning galaxy of white light, a yellow, yellowish white light that was spinning like this, like that, forming in front of it.
In front of a ship. Okay.
Yeah.
Have you ever seen one where somebody walks through it?
No, I have not.
Okay. I've seen them go through the wall, but I did not see, for instance, like an 8-foot circle of sparkly light portal that they went through. I didn't see that. The first individual I ever saw go through a wall, it just was as if the wall was not solid and they walked right through it as if it was a door, and it wasn't. I had an interesting experience from a client in Iowa who called me one day, freaked out, and she was a psychologist that worked for the state of Iowa, and she was on her way home, and it was dark, and it was winter just after sunset, and she was maybe 3 miles from home, but still outside of the city boundary of the small town where she lived in. And so rural route and on a major road. And she saw hanging in the air, maybe 100 yards in the air, so 300 feet, a big golden rectangle. And balls of light about the size of a basketball started coming from all these different directions, and they started going around this rectangle of light hanging in the air over a field and outside of her town. And she pulled off the main road onto a small gravel side road that was right next to this field, and she got out and she started looking at this thing. She had her cell phone with her, and she picked it up and she called her favorite girlfriend, one of her coworkers. She said, "You're never going to believe what I'm looking at." And she described it to her, and then she said something very strange on the phone to her friend. She said, "Oh, I'm blocking traffic. I need to move my car and go home." She hung up the phone without saying goodbye and got in her car, drove straight home. When she got home, she walked in the door, didn't say a word to her spouse, who already had dinner on the table, didn't go to the dining room table, went straight to her bedroom, put her pajamas on, crawled into bed, and slept all the way through to the next morning.
Huh.
She got up, she got dressed, she went to work, and when she got to work, her girlfriend said, "So what happened? What happened? You hung up on me." And she said, "What are you talking about?" She said, "The golden rectangle, the balls of light, and suddenly the memory came flooding back to her. If her girlfriend hadn't mentioned it to her, she would never have remembered it from the night before. And so it makes me wonder, somebody somewhere had telepathically inserted that idea into her that she needed to leave, go home, go straight to bed. And so she was
These are not the
suggested.
droids you're looking
That's
for.
right.
Yeah.
She was suggested. And very similar to the Jedis in Star Wars.
Yeah.
Yep, these are not the droids you're looking for. Move along.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Mark Abel of Colorado Bigfoot happened to photograph a wonderful picture of a portal in the sky in Colorado, one of the clearest ones I'd ever seen, hanging in the air. And big. Big as in, I'm guessing, something bigger than a small plane and smaller than a jumbo jet could fly into and out of it. So, I don't know how they operate. I do know what Tilcom has told us is that there are some portals that are ancient ones here on the planet, where the energy of the planet itself is the energy that operates the portal. It's not an artificial mechanical device that's created to open up a doorway here and then be done, and that's the only time it's ever used.
Do you remember that portal picture that you sent me in the desert of that looks like a swirling brown dust?
Let me see if it's the one that Mark sent. Let me see if I can find it. And if I can,
that
then
same image has actually been made into the petroglyphs of in some deserts and stuff like that. The exact same image of the same portal.
Huh. Let me show you what Mark Abel photographed if I can find it.
Oh.
If I can't, I'll have to look for it later. Well, it's not coming up when I type in portal. I will find it and see if I can post it later or send it to you. I don't want to take a lot of time and
Sure, yeah.
search for something that I'm not sure if I still have it on this laptop.
I know I have it on my phone.
If you have it on your phone, see if you can find it. Portals can be natural, like the ancient ones, and they tend to be in shapes of arches. Most of the ancient portals that I am aware of are marked in archaeoplanetography images in the landscape. Yes, that's the one that Mark Abel took. That's the one. So I don't know how we're going to, take that up to the camera and show people. That'd be the easiest.
Yeah.
So Mark Abel from Colorado Bigfoot took this image of a portal over the dirt road. And
I believe that same image has been found in petroglyphs.
Yeah, I thought that's cool. He's got so many things that he's captured on video or in photographs that nobody else has captured. It's just astonishing. My hat's off to that man, and he's tentative, very tentative. He's never spoken at a conference. He's never published anything other than the YouTube videos that he puts out. He doesn't feel adequate speaking in front of groups for some reason, even though he's become the world expert in structures that the Sasquatch build. I only tout a few Sasquatch researchers that I have become very impressed with, that I've learned a great deal from. Mark Abel is one of those. So Mike Patterson of Sasquatch, Ontario, Mark Abel, M-A-R-C, Abel, A-B-E-L-L, of Colorado Bigfoot. And then there's another individual in Colorado, Colorado Forest Beings. That individual, and I can't think of his name right now, and I apologize. So sorry. Also documents structures that the Sasquatch build out of stone, boulders, huge things, and has also pointed out what sure looks like megalithic construction, just like you see in the high mountains of Peru or the Andes, just like you see megalithic structures in Egypt, pyramids and things like that. We see that in here in the United States. If you want to see an example, go to the Sage, S-A-G-E, wall in Montana, and you will see pictures that have the same building style where you can't even slip a piece of paper between them up in Montana. And once you take a look at the means of construction, it sure looks like somebody was trained in the same style of architecture. And it makes me go, I bet that's Star Nation related. I wonder which one. We know from our friend Clifford Mahudi when he visited with us, and Clifford passed a year and a half ago, and we miss him terribly. but he let us know that every single Native American peoples and reservation in North America has Star Nation interaction stories that are ongoing. I can tell you that I had a great deal of friends with up in the Lakota reservations in South Dakota, and when they had extraterrestrial or UFO encounters or Sasquatch things, they would call me. And so we talk about it. And that I found that fascinating, but that was not unusual. What I found interesting was that different Star Nation groups taught different tribes or groups of people here in North America. And let me give you, for instance, if you talk about the Lakota, they were taught all of their sacred ceremonies and how to live peacefully with one another by a woman who came down from the sky, and when she floated down, she landed in front of two young braves. And she introduced herself as White Buffalo Calf Woman. One of the braves decided that she looked pretty, and he wanted to have his way with her. And immediately went and approached her to essentially rape her, and she killed him. The other young man observed all of this and decided maybe he better be really polite and take this woman to meet the elders of his community, and that's what he did. And so that Star Nation interaction was very different than, say, the Star Nation interaction that the Zuni Pueblo people had here on the border of Arizona, New Mexico, in their land, when they met the Shalako. And the Shalako is a nation, a Star Nation of 11, 12 foot tall, blue feathered beings who had a black ruff of feathers around their neck. And these 11, 12 foot tall beings each had a short 4 foot tall mechanical like helper that followed and assisted them wherever they went. And so there's a joke going around the internet about the blue birds.
Yeah, blue avians.
And the blue avians, believe it or not, have been part of New Mexico Zuni people's history and sacred history for a long time, because the Shalako had an interaction where they accepted the Zuni's help when a craft of theirs had a mechanical problem and crashed in New Mexico. It crashed up in the direction of a place called Cochiti Lake, which is between here and Santa Fe on the west side of the interstate. But when the Shalako first landed, they knew that one of their ships had crashed, and there were, I believe, 7 ships still remaining that were going to land, and they wanted to land on the Zuni reservation land because their reports said that the Zuni were friendly. Of all the Earth nations, that the Zuni themselves were friendly to Star Nations. So they chose to land on the Zuni land, and 6 out of the 7 ships landed. And in their oral history, it said the last ship missed the landing and ended up having to go all the way around the planet to come back and land on the land. The Shalako came out and explained to the Zuni that they had a crashed ship and where it was. And the Zuni said, "Oh, we know where that is. We'll lead you there. We'll help you." And in fact, that's what happened. The Shalako and the Zuni went together to the place of the crash site and took care of whatever was going on with the ship itself, took care of the passengers, the crew. And when they were all done, they came back to the Zuni land, and they'd been working for a long time. I don't know if it was days or overnight. I have no idea how long it took them to get there, clean things up, and come back. But when they arrived back in Zuniland, they were all in their dirty clothes from working and doing this retrieval stuff. And so the Shalico turned to the Zuni and said, we want to thank you for helping us. We're all in our messy clothes. I tell you what, let's all go back home, change, put on clean things, and meet down at the river at midnight. We have to leave it at dawn, but we have from midnight to dawn to feast and eat together and thank you for your assistance. And in fact, that's what happened. So the Zuni partied down with these 12-foot tall blue feathered beings. And they still celebrate that event on a yearly basis to this day. And so when you hear about the Zuni Shalico ceremony, that's what they're talking about.
That's neat.
Yeah, it really is. It's a great story. And they're very serious about it. They really are. The Shalico have turned into sacred beings to them. And I guess I understand if I was part of a village that had that happen and everybody in my village went to help these strange beings from somewhere else, we'd talk about it for years and centuries too.
Yeah.
It'd probably
Strange
be,
beings from space.
yeah, be talked about because they were so unique and different looking, but nice, which was the piece that they landed there because they knew that if they were nice to the Zuni would be nice back to them. So, other things. Let's see. We've been talking for quite a while and going for a good almost hour and a half here.
Yeah.
Do we have anything else to cover that we need to
Yeah.
discuss?
Take a look here.
Yeah, take a look at the list there of anything that. Port stops and motherships. I don't know and have not had a lot of conversation with the Ponti when they travel from, say, Puntal to here. Are there places where they stop, like a roadside cafe would be for here? Are there places that they stop that they can get emergency help or medical help or stay overnight or shop or trade or whatever? I honestly have not had any of those conversations specifically with the Ponti. I don't know why we've never checked with them. But when
Well, it was brought up at one point.
yeah, I don't remember. I've so
Okay.
many things. When I type for them, frequently I am so tired
Oh,
or
okay.
in such a state that the fingers go automatically, and later, if you asked me what I'd said or translated for them, I would have no idea until I reread it.
Okay. There
So-
was somebody who had asked this question, and the response back was from one of the Ponti and confirmed that yes, there are similar things to, like, highway stopovers where people can get refreshments and food or maybe repairs or something like that. And they said, yeah, there are places like that throughout the galaxies in different parts. And they also said that the scene in the original Star Wars with the cantina, that's real life.
Yeah, the variety of people that you see
Except
that are
no droids.
yeah.
We don't serve those kind.
Yeah, interstellar that gather in the same place at the same time and can interact in the same sort of general environment is astonishing to me. They also told us that the facility under the Sandia Mountain also has satellite tunnels out that extend out from the mountain east and west and go to underground facilities that are seldom used, but are there if a star nation needs a specific environment created for them. So if they need a specific atmospheric niche or specific atmosphere to breathe, that's, let's say, greater oxygen or less nitrogen or whatever, that they can create that there. If they need a specific gravity that's different, they can recreate that there.
gravities.
And
yeah.
so they can make a visitor to Earth as comfortable as possible with their own natural environmental needs of at least breathing and living and sleeping and doing whatever. We've asked the Ponti about their dietary stuff and the diets of other star nations, and it's about as wide and varied as you can see across the star nation spectrum. The diet of the Sasquatch is very different than the diet of the Ponti.
Yeah, that's true.
And so every nation has its own dietary requirements and things that it can and cannot eat or can and cannot digest or find work with their system versus are poisonous for their system, kind of thing. And so when we meet a new star nation, we never assume that we know what they can consume or drink or how they're going to communicate. We just have to kind of be an open book and learn from scratch if a new nation stops by. And we've had that happen on a fairly regular basis. Regular being several times a year, we will get to know a new nation more than once, or they'll return and we'll see them again. We had an assignment, I had an assignment from Tilcum and Tani to draw a number of the Star Nation individuals. And in fact, you can see some of those on my YouTube channel. But the satellite tunnels out from the Sandia were multiple, and the unused rooms, corridors, on older parts of the tunnel system were not a small part of what's beneath that mountain. And so there's a lot there that's empty and unused, but waits for an emergency so that if they had to house 300 people, suddenly they could, you know, from wherever. So
Yeah, right.
I think we've covered our topics pretty good here, unless you see another one on our list that, oh, we're speaking of underground stuff. That's the other thing that we had discussions with the Clifford Mahudi and the Zuni about, is they have a piece of land that if you look on a map in eastern Arizona, you will see something marked as Zuni Reservation. And then if you look at the border of Arizona and New Mexico, you'll see another thing that's marked as Zuni Reservation, and the town or village of Zuni is there. I didn't know about the one in Arizona and started talking to Clifford about it, and no Zuni lives as on the land in Arizona that is marked as Zuni Reservation. They all live in the New Mexico land. And I said, so I don't understand, what's the land, the reservation land in Arizona about? And Clifford said, well, it's sacred land that we pilgrimage to, walking from Zuni to this location, which is approximately 40 miles away. And we refer to it as Zuni Heaven. I said, what's special about Zuni Heaven? He said, it's where we go to talk to and exchange or trade information or things with other star nations that are here and have facilities underground. I said, wait a minute, let me get this straight. You traded things with the star nations in this area that you call Zuni Heaven? What did you trade? He said, well, we make prayer bundles that have feathers, and the brighter colored the better, and the neater or more unusual the better. So we also add other things to the prayer bundles, but when we historically think about the things that were traded, the most common things were seeds. We would give seeds and we would receive seeds back. And the seeds that we received back were oftentimes things that we had not grown before in our land, but that actually did pretty well. They were gifts from the Star Nation folks. And I went, that's one of those things that just makes sense. Because again, if I'm thinking about scientists going to another planet to understand what's going on that planet, one of the things that they would likely collect and bring back, because it was easy to do so and contained the genetics in a compact form of plants and animals, would be seeds for plants or sperm and egg for animals. Small, compact, contains all the DNA you need, boom, right there. Mm-hmm. And I went, you know what? Yeah, I can understand that, because that would help them understand the environment of another planet. And then Tilcomb went on to say, after we had a discussion with Clifford, Tilcomb went on to point out that there are plants here on Earth that you can find on other planets that have been brought by Star Nations and traded. And I said, okay, give me a for instance. And he said, bamboo. I said, bamboo? He said, normally, if it has multiple functions, if it's an edible, a fuel source, a textile or building source, so if it can create a fiber or be used in construction, and if it aids in an environmental niche to keep that niche stable. Bamboo filled all of those requirements.
Right, yeah. What about wheat?
Yes, some grains, but specifically grains that could also be fuel source or fiber source. So let me give you, for instance, flax is edible, seeds, source of oil, so fuel, and a source of fiber for weaving to make linen. Mm-hmm. So flax can be found other places too. Things that have a long, durable life as a seed that don't poop out after a while. So we've all heard of plants that a seed is, say, 20 years old and it still grows, or they've got 300-year-old seeds found in a cave and they still germinated. Those kinds of things, the longevity of a plant, along with the multiple uses, is oftentimes an indicator that it had been traded for and brought here. They also look for things here that would be good in environmental niches elsewhere. So I found that whole discussion with them fascinating. And that's another point that I want to make, and then we'll wrap this up. If you have an area of expertise, like plants and animals, or music in your case, or drawing in my case, if you have a skill, it's really a good idea to talk to the Pountee about that kind of thing that you love. If you really like it, like if you really like music, or if I really like drawing, talking to them and sharing with them about skills that you have that you love, and comparing that in your world, your culture, with them and their culture, and then recording that information that they share back with you. We cannot have topics of discussion on all topics. We need other people to invite the Ponti and have topics of discussion with them that are their niche, their world, their understanding, their area of expertise, their knowledge base, so that they can have an accurate, meaningful exchange of information about how is it similar to the Ponti and their culture or other star nations. And then if people who have other niches of interest and knowledge can record the information, and if we can pool that information, then we can build an understanding of a star nation's culture by what they have really shared with us, but across Earth humans across the entire planet. So I encourage people to think about what's the thing that you do that you love and you're good at or you know a lot about, and have conversations about that with the Star Nation folks and ask them about that in their world. And then let's pool that information. That would be super helpful, whether that thing is a skill like cooking, or fixing cars, or understanding the engineering of a thing, whatever it is. The only thing I would caution everybody to do is be polite. Don't treat any Star Nation person like an it or an alien. They're a person. And
or being demanding.
yeah, don't convey the idea that all you want from them is their technology. You would not want them to treat you that way if the roles were reversed. And
you want to be spoken to politely too.
yes. So most Star Nations have been traveling this galaxy for a long time and are more ancient people than we are and deserve respect. If we want respect, we need to give respect.
And some of these Star Nations are so advanced in their level of IQ that dealing with them, for us to be able to communicate with them, is very difficult. I'm speaking from personal experience with a tall white that I've had the opportunity to speak to, who the best way to describe having a conversation, she may get back to you with an answer to a question that you had asked 1,000 days ago. But the answer might be something like, yes, it may so happen, possibly, if that person so chooses to do that.
Vague and doesn't seem very specific.
Not
of an
very
answer.
specific,
Yeah.
but it
Free will.
means
Isn't
it
that
brings
something?
more questions.
Yes.
And but you have to be respectful of their answer, because they took a long time to answer your question according to exactly very specific words that they want
Yes.
to convey. And if you
Yes.
throw it back in their face, like, what is that supposed to mean? You're, well, you know, that means nothing.
They'll shut right down.
They'll shut right down, because you don't respect the amount of time they took to answer your question. Best example I can give is Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. They built a supercomputer that took 10 million years to answer the question of what's life, the universe, and everything. And they got back an answer that was kind of disappointing. 42. Honestly,
that was the answer, right?
That was the answer. Honestly, that is what it's like speaking to some of these Star Nations.
It is, and so when we translate for them, one, we try to understand what point they're trying to convey, what kind of emotion they're trying to convey, what kind of information and translation, so that the majority of Earth humans will understand what they're trying to talk about. So helping them choose the right words and phrasing that have the right meaning is part of our role, because We understand the nuances of spoken language, different than written language. What you read in books, what you learned in school from books, is not your normal pattern of speaking to each other out loud. You don't speak like a book reads. You speak with slang. You speak with terms that come and go in popularity. You speak with words that have multiple meanings. What used to be cool back when I was growing up now is fire, right?
Yeah.
So the slang term has totally done a 180 from, oh, that's cool, to, oh, that's fire. And so because that's happened in 50 years, the Ponti and the other Star Nations, who are mostly book learned, they are not normally conversation English or conversational language learned. They're book learned and they don't know the slang and need explanation of a number of things. The phrases that you and I take for granted because we've known them since we were kids, they don't understand. And so they have a lot of questions as to our word choices and what things mean. And we have to understand what they're trying to convey too. And so our role as telepathic translators is to assist them trying to find the right words. We understand the words that they're trying to say, but the difference in conveying emotional concepts or concepts with emotion is very different. And we need to understand, are they trying to be kind? Are they trying to be firm? Are they trying to be like a teacher? Are they a little upset, but they really don't want to show it? Are they teasing? Are they being sarcastic? Is it a double entendre? Is it a triple entendre? And so, by the way, that's their sense of humor, which is the one thing that delighted and surprised me when I first met the Ponti. These guys have a sense of humor that's marvelous.
Grayson.
And they laugh.
Yeah, Grayson with his double and triple entendres of words and
it's
meanings.
part of their humor. And so when you can have a phrase mean 2 or 3 different things, they like that. That trips their trigger. And so we listen now for their double and triple entendres to catch their humor.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's been a lot of fun. Well, sir, we've had a long, good conversation, and I think that this talk can break apart into little vignettes of OFC talks.
Oh yeah, I think I can make about 25 out of this.
I think so, but I think we covered our topics pretty well.
Yeah.
If you have a topic that you would like us to talk about that we haven't fully shared,
send them to Twitter.
Well, you can send it to Twitter. You can put it in the comment section of this video, and or you can get a hold of Kevin or I on Facebook or Twitter and say, would you ask the Ponti this? Or would you ask the Sasquatch that? And that would be marvelous. Maybe next time we'll cover what's the portrait drawing process of them like.
Yeah, for you. What's that process like?
And I will be hopefully doing more drawing and recording of drawing some of the portraits and speeding it up so that you can see the beginning, middle, and end of the process in short time instead of the hours and hours it takes me. So I think that'd be fun. But I also want to describe what the interactions have been like when I do draw them, because the conversations we have are marvelous. So, thank you, sir. We appreciate your help, and we want to say a special thank you to our wonderful
technician Dale.
Yes, our camera technician Dale, who set everything up for us and is helping us figure the ins and outs of both new hardware and software to us. And thank you, sir. You have been a godsend and have been working all hours to help us out, and we appreciate it. Thank you, too, to the individual, Dale's family member, Dale Sr., who helped us purchase some of the equipment that we are now using and also is helping with some of the understanding of its capabilities and its potential that I'm not real techie and I'm not knowledgeable about, but I'm sure willing to learn. So,
Yes, thank you, Dale
thank
Senior.
you, thank you, thank you.
Yeah.
We will bid you all good night and good day, and thank you for tuning in. Like always, we sure would appreciate it if you hit that like and subscribe. That would help us in all kinds of ways.
And remember to keep your eyes to the skies.
Take care and wear your day with ease. Tick, tick. Bye-bye.